Welcome, everybody, and Shabbat Shalom and Chag Sameach.
Shabbat Shalom.
Today
Shalom.
is the second day of Shavuot in the diaspora, and it's customary on Shavuot to study the book of Ruth. It's the shortest book in the Bible, and it is the reasons that it's short, and we'll talk about that. But most importantly, why do we read it today? What is really the reason that on Shavuot we read the book of Ruth? So, uh, on the surface, the only connection that we might have is the Zman Ktsir Chitim, that it was the time of the harvest, and we are now in the time of the harvest, and bringing the bikurim, the first fruit, to the temple. So that's one reason that we would be speaking about it. But of course, the deeper meaning is that the book of Ruth speaks about conversion. Now, conversion in ancient times, today we know that conversion involves going to the mikvah. If it's male, it's circumcision. But in ancient times, I guess the circumcision, of course, it's clear that you have to do it and to be part of the covenant of Abraham. But the mikvah, for example, or studying Torah specifically, is not really mentioned part of the law about conversion. But what we do see about conversion, which is even more important, of course, is the immersion, not in the water, not in the mikvah, but in the immersion in the people. So think of any language that you want to study, you want to learn, you have to immerse yourself in. So think of people who could be speaking fluent French, but they're not French. So Ruth did what in ancient time was the natural process of conversion. What did they do? They literally came and lived with the people. And Ruth does what Jethro does before, and we'll look at the differences though, because there's significant differences between what Ruth does and what Jethro. We'll take these two people to compare and contrast. So we can start with Jethro. Jethro was the first convert because there was no nation of people of Israel before Jethro. They had just left Egypt as a nation, and they came to Mount Sinai. So it says Jethro heard and came to meet the people. So Jethro heard something in order to come and connect to the people of Israel. And the Talmud asks, what did he hear? What did Yitro hear that made him come? Now, when he came physically to be with the people in Mount Sinai, it's on the surface, he came to be with them physically, but really, he joined them. The question is, did he remain with them? And that's an open question in the Torah, because after the Mount Sinai, the revelation and the receiving of the Torah, he it said there's a conversation between Moshe and his father-in-law, when his father-in-law said, "I'm going to go back to Midian." He was a Midianite. And Moshe really wants him to come and join the people. So that is the question. It's debatable if he actually converted or joined the people for that episode and then went back to his people. But either way, he went through a conversion, Jethro, because first of all, the revelation itself in Mount Sinai was a singular event in history. There was nothing before that and nothing after that. That a whole nation stood and saw a revelation. It wasn't a revelation to one person or a something behind a bush or behind a mountain. It was in front of everybody. So that's one reason that it was a converting experience just by being there. But the second thing about the conversion, of course, is when he heard. Hearing is learning. It's the same word in the Torah for learning. How do we know that? Naaseh v'nishma. When the people said, we will do and we will hear. But hearing means we will learn. We will take one step at a time in learning what it's about. So, so he joined the people and he literally studied Torah because they just received the Torah, they received the Ten Commandments, and of course some of the oral law that Moshe taught. So that's Jethro, and the word Jethro, and that we will compare to the word Ruth. They both mean to have an overflowing cup. And this is very, very important when you come to a situation of conversion, because and we will get to the story, but we'll just give a little bit of an intro. When Ruth and Orpah, her according to the Midrash, was her sister, when they lose both their husbands and they want to follow Naomi, their mother-in-law, there's a point where Orpah turns around. Naomi is able to convince her to turn around and not follow her. And we'll look at the story, of course. But for Ruth, she said, right, I will go with you wherever you go. I will be with you wherever you are.
Who did that go if so go on?
Yes, which means spiritually, in order to convert, you have to be certain, right? We don't convert anybody who is not certain about wanting to join the Jewish people. And actually, on the contrary, right? We reject them first, at least 3 times. We say, are you crazy? You're going to join the people who are persecuted, that are they have to roam the earth and don't have a place of their own. And now that we do have our place of our own. We get missiles all the time and attacked. So why would you want to join a people like this if you are, in your right mind? So if you are doubtful, it means you're missing something. Your cup is not full spiritually. So you are not going to be part of that. And we see a lot of Jews who converted for all kinds of other reasons, and there are literally the term is ger tzedek or gerat tzedek, which means that it's a righteous ger, a convert. If you're not a righteous convert, the pressure on the Jewish people is going to break you. It's not gonna last. And Orpah, at a certain point, when Naomi presents the difficulties, she said, I don't have more children to give you. I'm lonely. I'm poor. I now have to travel through the wilderness to get back to my land. Really? Is that what you want? So, in a sense, where Ruth is with Naomi is where the people of Israel in the time of Jethro, because they had just come back from exile, but they're in the beginning of the journey. They're not in the desert yet. They're in the desert, but they have not started yet the full journey of the 40 years. Similarly, Ruth is just leaving Moab to go back to the land of Israel. Both cases of the Jewish people in Egypt, where they were there for 400 years, and Ruth and Naomi with her husband, her late husband who died, Elimelech, probably were there about, I would say, 40 years. I don't think it specifies there, but probably because she left younger and now she's older. And the idea of 40, of course, is the spiritual journey through the desert. And in both cases, they went to exile. They first moved the family of Naomi to Moab, or the people of the family of Jacob before they were a nation, when they were just a family moving to Egypt, was for financial reasons. Moab was, of course, a place where Naomi and Elimelech had political connections, and they left the land of Israel when there was a famine, and they were very wealthy, and they were afraid that they would have to give charity to a lot of people. So they evaded that mitzvah. The second example, or the previous example of the people of the family of Jacob, they left because of a famine as well. And the Torah also tells us that Jacob tells his children that lama titra'u, why are you almost like flaunting the fact that you have food? Because remember, they came from Egypt the first time. They brought food from Joseph before they moved to Egypt. So they had food. They didn't know how long they're going to have the food, but they had food. And if they would have remained in the land, maybe the local people would have just taken it away from them, or fought them for it. So they also decide to go and go to exile. So, or to diaspora and leave the land. So that's why we also see the mitzvah of living in the land of Israel is such an important mitzvah. And there are three reasons that that halacha permits us to leave Israel, and only three reasons. One is to find a mate, a husband or wife, a spouse, for livelihood. So in this case, it would be sort of livelihood. It's not really, but for livelihood and for learning Torah, studying Torah. So, for example, for many years, Israel didn't have big yeshivot. For 2,000 years, Israel was a desolate land as far as the Jewish people go. And actually, not even as far as the Jewish people go. Not a lot of people lived there. It was not developed. We have the famous Nachmanides story when he had to leave Spain. He, in the 1200s, he came to Jerusalem and he wrote a letter back to his son saying, I can't even get a minyan. I have to get the wall painter to help me. So this is really the kind of the framework in which we work in, that the revelation in Sinai and the story that we're going to start reading is a beginning of a journey in the desert or the wilderness. One is literally and one is figuratively. But a real conversion or ger tzedek, a righteous convert, doesn't come at the end when you're wealthy and when you have everything, because then you can always say the reasons that they converted was, it was not pure. God remembers this for the Jewish people, and he reminds us when he's angry at us and wants to annihilate us, he keeps reminding us, Belechtech acharai bamidbar, when you walked with me or followed me in the desert, in the wilderness, when you had nothing and you could have stayed in Egypt, or you could have chosen idols because you were hungry. And that's a danger. When you're hungry, you can eat junk food. So when you're spiritually hungry, you can go with and worship idols. So, but at that point, you decided to go with me when I was still, you didn't know where you were going. So the story of Abraham. So Benzi, that was a good answer, that Abraham was a convert, the first convert from idolatry into following the one God. And it's the same thing, same story. God tells him, walk with me one step at a time to the land I will show you. So that's kind of the framework. So we're going to start reading the story. We will have to probably skip here and there, but it begins with in the days of the chieftains, the shoftim. So there was no king in Israel yet. So we know it was before King David, King Solomon. There was a famine in the land, and a man from Bethlehem in Judah with his wife and two sons went to reside in the country of Moab. Now, their names were Elimelech, his wife Naomi, which are good names because Elimelech is God is my king. And Naomi comes from the word Noam, sweetness, pleasure, pleasant. But the sons, the two sons, and of course, names in the Torah and the Bible are projection. Everybody names their children based on what they want to see for them, right? Their future. But they may not have gotten those names at birth, but these are the names that the Torah or the Bible gives them. Their names are Machlon vechilion. You couldn't get two worse names. Machlon comes from machala, sickness, and kilion comes from klaya, which is annihilation. So you can already kind of project of where this story is going. But remember, the Jewish story, and this is why it's a real story. This is why we're still here 3,338 years after the Sinai event at Mount Sinai, and 4,000 years if you start with Abraham. Why? Because we come back from the ashes. No other nation did this in the world. Even ancient nations that are still out there, they never left and came back. You can say the Chinese are 5,000 years old. Okay, yes. But they never left China as a whole people and had to come back. The Jewish people survived for 2,000 years without a homeland. I mean, the homeland was always there. Israel was always there, and we always kept in touch with the land and moved back and forth. But we didn't have sovereignty, and we were exiled from our land. So this is the story begins with that, and they move to Moab, and they marry the two daughters of the Talmud says they were the daughters of the king of Moab. They were that connected and wealthy. They married, but in a sense, they married out, right? So it doesn't matter how wealthy or high up and connected the spouse is, but at the end, they were not Jewish, and they were, of course, living in a foreign land. So Elimelech dies, and the two sons die too, without leaving heirs. So these two sons that married the Moabite women, one named Orpah and one named Ruth. By the way, Oprah Winfrey takes her name from Orpah. She was supposed to be called Orpah, but somehow the letters were confused. She became Oprah, and Orpah means the back of the neck, orif. So, which is very interesting because the Jewish people are considered kshe orif, stubborn. When the Torah talks about our stubbornness, it talks about the stiffness of our neck, the back of the neck. It's not the front of the neck, the back of the neck, which means that it doesn't matter what yoke you put on us, how much you lash us with the whip, we are stubborn. We're still there. So of course, stubbornness is a two-edged sword. It could be stubborn in not adhering to God, but on the other hand, it's about adhering to God. And the reason we're still here is because we're stubborn. So when we hold on to something, nobody can release the grip from our hands. So the two children that married Orpah and Ruth died as well, and then Naomi is now a widow. She just her two sons died. She doesn't have grandchildren, so she is aririt. She's a lonely person. So again, lonely and alone are two different things. But she testified for herself that she is lonely. She feels alone and lonely. So her and of course in ancient Near East cultures, if you were a woman by yourself, a widow with no children, then you have no rights. You can't inherit anything. You can't. There's some. You can't do certain work. You can't provide for yourself. So her only solution was to go back to the land of Israel. Now remember, they were wealthy people, so they still had land in the land in Israel. So she's hoping that that's going to redeem them. Yes, Bensy, you have to unmute for that.
Sorry, I'm just curious. Does Elimelech have any brothers? In other words, was there any Levirate marriage in those days that would take Naomi?
Yes, but not really Naomi because because Naomi is already removed from there because she can be redeemed in other ways, and of course somebody can marry her, but and she says herself, I to her daughters-in-law, I can't give you another child. That would
Mm.
have been a Levirate marriage
Okay.
when her son died without leaving children. So levirate marriage is only when the man dies without children.
Ah,
If you
thank you.
had children and they died, it's already out of that category.
Thank you.
Right. So her children died without leaving, without having children. So right. So she tells them one of the reasons that she rejects them, she said, I can't give you another child, meaning you can't keep living with me in the Jewish way because I don't have another child to give you in a Levirate way. So, and again, I don't know how old they were, but they would have to wait for her to be pregnant, to be this. But she said, Baluti, she's not, she doesn't, she's beyond that age that she can even have children. So she starting to go back to Israel. And her two daughters-in-law said, but Naomi said to her two daughters-in-law that were following her, turn back, each of you, to her mother's house. It's interesting. She says mother's house and not father's house. May God deal kindly with you as you have dealt with the dead and with me. So clearly they were good. She liked her daughters-in-law, and that's nice, very nice to have that. A lot of times when I do a funeral, when I officiate at a funeral, and I learn that the family worked together. They had a business, and the children-in-law worked with the parents-in-law. I always say he was an angel, and I said, well, if they work together, that means they were, they were angels. So, so literally, she says they replied to her and said to her, "No, we will return with you to your people." So she pushed once, and they pushed back once. That's why we need to do it 3 times. We push back people 3 times to see if they really are serious. And then she goes back again. She says to them, turn back, my daughters, for I am too old to be married, meaning to bear children. Even if I thought there was hope for me, even if I were married tonight and I also bore sons. So she tells them, should you wait for them to grow up? Should you, on your account, debar yourselves from marriage? Oh no, my daughters, my lot is far more bitter than yours, for God's hand has struck out against me. So she says 2 things here. First of all, she calls herself now Mara. Mara means bitter, Marli. And her name is Naomi, which is sweetness and pleasant. So that turns from sweet to bitter. But there's an expression in Hebrew, me'az yatsa matok, meaning from bitterness came sweet. Of course, it works in English too. So but she said, I am bitter now. You can, you can wait, you can take your chances, but I don't think you should because chances are very slim to none. So they pushed back again. They broke into weeping again. And Orpah kissed her mother-in-law farewell, but Ruth clung to her. So Orpah, turned literally her oref. Hefneta oref. So she goes back. So it didn't work for her. She goes back, but Ruth clung on. So then now Naomi tries to break Ruth. And she says to her, see, your sister-in-law has returned to her people and her gods to follow your sister-in-law. why do you need this? Now you're even by yourself. Before you may have had, company. Now you don't even have that. But Ruth replied, and this is, of course, this is a beautiful phrase and verse that we use in every conversion, of course. Do not urge me to leave you, to turn back and not follow you. For wherever you go, I will go. Wherever you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God, my God.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, she says basically what she was telling Naomi, cut the your effort to try to push me. I'm going to precede you already, and I'm going to give you all the options possible that you are now going to try to break me through, and I'm going to tell you I'm going to keep going. Now, the Talmud has a beautiful midrash that talks about this phrase or this verse, because what it says here, that this was actually a conversation. It fills in the gaps. This was a conversation between Ruth and Naomi. Naomi kept telling her. So if we take the four situations, she said, I will go wherever you go. Because Naomi told her, I'm going to go now in the desert. I don't have the jitney, the Hampton jitney to take me. I'm going to walk through, and it's going to be dangerous. It's going to be, I may not have water, food, be attacked. And she said, I will go wherever you go. Then she said, I will lodge wherever you lodge. Now, the problem with lodging is they're two women. So they can't lodge anywhere because of they can't lodge where they're men. They have to have a separate lodging. So that's another difficulty. And she said, I will, maybe we may have to sleep outside. She said, I will sleep wherever you sleep. And then she said, your people be my people. Why is that? The Midrash says, why was it important for her to say, your people be my people? Because according to the Midrash, Naomi said to her, even if you come with me to Israel, people are going to reject you. You're a convert. You're a Moabite. And not only that, there is a restriction for Moabite people to be included in the people of Israel, to convert. Why? Because when the Israelite left Egypt and walked through the desert, if you remember, Moab not only did not greet them with bread and water, but sent to curse them with Balaam. So after that, God said, I'm restricting any Moabite to convert to Israel. So even if they want to, they can't. But then it changed from Moavi, because the word in Hebrew, of course, English doesn't have gender, but in Hebrew it says, Lo yavo Moavi b'kahal Adonai. So the halacha is Moavi, no, but Moavit, the women are allowed. Why is the distinction between, what is it, like discrimination here? Well, in one sense, but because the women did not go out to fight the Israelites, the women stayed behind. So they are in less restrictive status. But either way, you're still a convert from Moab. They're not going to like you. They're going to reject you. And we know, how do we know that? Ruth was the great grandmother of King David. And King David himself, 4 generations later, was still rejected. How do we know that he was still rejected? When Samuel came to inaugurate or to find the next king, God tells him, go to the children of Jesse, Yishai. He has 8 children. He doesn't, I don't think he said the number. I don't remember, but I think he said he has his sons. One of his sons is going to be the next king. So he came to anoint the next king. And Jesse brings his children one after the other. He brings 8 children. Or 7. I think David was the 8th. And none of them, God says, it's not them. And Samuel asks Jesse, do you have another son somewhere? Because I'm told that it's this, but it's not these 7 children. And Jesse said, oh yeah, I have this one more son, but he's a no good shepherd somewhere. I didn't even bring him because I didn't even think he would be the next king. There's no point. There's no way he would be considered. And when King David then later writes Psalms, and he said, Even ma'asu habonim, the cornerstone that the builders rejected, became the cornerstone. V'hayta lerosh pinah. He's speaking about that. He was rejected. And why was he rejected? The Midrash explained that because Jesse thought that because he is in the lineage of Ruth, his other children somehow were probably not. They were from another wife. But King David was from the lineage of Ruth, and he was rejected even 4 generations later. The Talmud actually says that we call a convert, they used to call a convert, we don't do that anymore, but like Onkelos, who wrote the famous translation to the Bible, and even Rabbi Akiva, they were converts. One of their parents was a convert. And they were considered convert. You would call a convert 10 generations. You still call them a convert. So that's what she's telling her. She's telling her, don't follow me. You'll be rejected by my people. And she said, your people will be my people. And then finally, of course, your God will be my God. It means that when they married in Moab, and of course Moab was a place of idol worshiping, was clearly they married a political marriage, like they do in royal families to keep the, either the money or the gene pool. I'm not sure yet, but definitely the money and the influence and the power. So she says to her, go back to your idol worshiping. You don't have to follow me to the place of the one God and believing in that. And Ruth says, your God is my God. So this is a full conversion, and we learn conversion from Ruth. We don't learn conversion from Jethro. Now, getting back to their names, Jethro and Ruth, they both mean my cup is full or overflows, like in Psalm 23, right? Kosi revaya, my cup overflows. Ruth comes from the word rava, rave, gan rave. So is when revaya means that you have you are satiated. You drank enough to be satiated. When you say, oh, I was so thirsty and I drank a full gallon now and I'm rave. So Ruth comes from that. My cup overflows. And Yitro which again, it's the same letters. They have the same letters in their names. Yitro means yeter, to leave off something, to leave beyond, to have something beyond. So it means that the Jewish people don't really need converts. It's really if you feel that you have saturated your life beyond, and you know that you need something else, something beyond what you've had so far. She was a king. She was a princess in Moab, but she said, "I'm willing to be a poor, rejected woman, a maidservant in the house of Israel, than a princess in Moab." And the Talmud has other examples. We say that when Abraham married, he married Sarah, of course, but then he married, what's her name? The mother of Ishmael. He married Hagar.
Hagar.
Agar.
Yeah,
Hagar.
so when he
Hagar.
married
Hagar.
Hagar, so Hagar was she was a princess, an Egyptian princess, but she knew that there's something in the tent of Sarah, tent of Abraham. She saw angels. Angels were surrounding the tent, and she knew that Egypt is empty on the outside, on the inside, and she preferred being, of course, a maidservant in the tent of Abraham. So that's really the story of the conversion, and that's what I wanted to really concentrate on. The rest of the story, I'm going to kind of go through a little quicker. They arrive Israel, and in the second chapter, they know that there's a redeemer in the family. His name is Boaz, and Boaz means courage. He has oz, he has courage. And why did he need courage? Because he's now is entrusted in a responsibility that he may not need to take on himself, but he chooses to do so. And they're poor now, and he's a very wealthy man. He is now harvesting his fields, and they come to his fields, and he understands who this woman is because his people tell him that she came with Naomi, came back from Moab. And of course, he knows that Naomi is a relative of his, and he understands that they don't have children, and he would be the Levirate marriage, right? He would be doing that for Ruth. So they scheme a whole thing that Naomi tells her, go, and when he's in the field, speak to him, be with him. And he's very flattered, of course, and he wants to take her and to marry her. And the Talmud says, there's a midrash that says that his wife just died, meaning, of course, in those days he could have taken a second wife, but they somehow, the midrash says his wife just died, meaning his whole life. And the midrash also says that he was with Ruth one night. They married, they were together one night, and he died. He was an much older man. She was young, but he did the mitzvah of yibum, the Levirate marriage. And from that one night came the twins, and that became then the grandparents of the Peretz became the grandson, the grandfather of King David, and and so forth. So, but before that, they had to ask somebody who was a closer relative. And that closer relative said, I don't want to do that. That's what Naomi said, that they're not going to like to be with you because you're a convert and you're from Moab and they don't want to, mess their hands. So they want to stay clean. So that is why that man, we don't know his name. He's Ploni Almoni. So actually the term for anonymous person in Hebrew comes from here. Ploni Almoni. They don't even mention his name. Why? Because he didn't give her a name. He didn't redeem her and give her a child and a name, Yad Vashem, right? A continuation. God said, you will not have a name in my book. But Boaz, not only does he have a name, he has a great name. So he marries her, and we know the rest. And then Naomi, then this whole negotiation of back and forth. And we do have that ritual of the Yibum or Chalitza. There's if you don't want to marry the wife of your late brother, then you have to do Chalitza. Chalitza means to separate or to come out of something. So you're coming out of that covenant of that marriage, because by default you're betrothed. You're not married, but you are betrothed to each other. Automatically when the brother dies without a child, the next kin is already betrothed to the widow automatically. So if they want to get out of that responsibility, they have to do chalitza. And what is chalitza? Like taking the shoe off. So that's what it says here. They're doing this ritual. Now, this was formally done. This is in the last chapter. This was formally done in Israel in cases of redemption or exchange. To validate any transaction, one party should take off a sandal and hand it to the other. Such was the practice in Israel. Now, we know that chalitza actually also involves spitting in the shoe. And to show the dissatisfaction of that rejection. And then, so when the Redeemer said to Boaz, acquire for yourself, he drew off his sandal. Now, it's very interesting. I mean, we see, it's a sandal. Why is it so important? Not such an important item for us. Everybody has like 20 pairs of shoes in the closet. But as my parents testified, and even in the film, my mother said, most people who came from Yemen and they journeyed through the desert, they didn't even have shoes. They didn't have shoes. Shoes was a very expensive item. They had shoes because her father was a leather maker. He was a shoemaker. He worked with leather. So they had shoes. So that was a big deal. And shoes, of course, means the journey. It's what you step on. It's what you kind of leads you forward. And then it says, he says, I am also acquiring Ruth. He acquired the land that Naomi owned. She couldn't own it herself because she was a widow. But the next kin could. So he acquired the land and he acquired Ruth's responsibility with it, and the wife of Machlon as my wife, so as to perpetuate the name. See, the name here is very important of the deceased upon his estate, that the name of the deceased may not disappear from among his kinsmen and from the gate of his hometown. You are witnesses today. The gate of his town is important here because what it means, the gate of his town is the honor of a person. It's about his public reputation. If you remember the Eshet Chayil that we sing every Friday night, it says, Yehaleluha b'she'arim, that her children and her husband praise her in the gates. So gates mean also the public space, but it also means, of course, the court. So this is legal now in court. And then the women around said, and the women said to Naomi, "Blessed be God who has not withheld a redeemer from you today. May his name be perpetuated in Israel." The name, of course, for us as Jews is very, very important. It's the essence of a person. It's the name, it's the legacy, and so forth. And then Naomi adopts as the grandmother, but she's really also the mother. She adopts her grandson as a foster mother, and the women neighbors gave him a name, saying, "A son is born to Naomi." They name him Oved, and that's how the book ends. He was the father of Jesse, father of David. So that was the grandson of the grandfather of David. This is the line of Peretz. So the two twins that came from Ruth. Peretz is the father of Hetzron. Hetzron gave birth to Ram. Ram begat Nachshon. Nachshon Boaz. Boaz Jesse. And Jesse begat David. So it goes back to Peretz. Sorry, Peretz was not the son of Ruth. The Peretz was the son of Judah from the Levirate marriage. Right? King Judah had after the sale of Joseph to Egypt, it says that his wife died and he left his people. He went to another place and he didn't want to give Tamar, his third son, Shelah, because already two sons of his died when they married her. So he was afraid. So she pretended to be a harlot, and he slept with her. And then the twins came, and then so it goes from the line of Judah to say that David ben, right? When we say that the Messiah is from the king from Beit David, but Beit David is Judah. And why Judah? Because Judah was the leader, and Judah was Lo Yamush Mechokek. They were the leaders already when Moses told them that, and when before that when Jacob told them that. So that's to show the lineage, and it ends with King David. So to conclude, the book of Ruth shows us that God brings redemption from sources that we may not imagine even. And we come back from the ashes. And the story for us is the full story. We would never reject a piece in our biography just because it's nicer on the resume. if we take the bad, so to speak, right? In Psalm 23, we say, your staff and your rod comfort me. The good times and the bad times, which means that there's really no half empty cup in Judaism, in the Torah. There's no such thing. We say we encourage people to look at the half full cup, right? But in the Torah, when you live with God, when you follow God, there is no half full because there's no half empty. Both situations are from God. Gam zu letovah. God will somehow bring redemption from this as well. And not only that, God usually brings the redemption out of the darkness. And I'll just conclude with what I said on Rosh Hashanah this year. This year is a very, very important year because when King Solomon says there's a time for birth, time for death, time to sow, time to reap, right? All these 28 seasons, a season to do this, a season to do that. 14 are positive, 14 are negative. And the last two are a season, a time for war and a time for peace. So the rabbis tell us that if you take 6,000 that we count for, right? We count from creation to redemption, 6,000. We're now at the year 5,786, right? If you divide 6,000 to those 28 seasons that King Solomon wrote in Kohelet, you get, in Ecclesiastes, you get 214. How many years do we have until 6,000 now? Quick calculations.
214.
214. We have just entered, we're transitioning from a time of war to a time of peace. We're in the last period. So we're lighting the Shabbat candles already. So it's like the last minute. But what's also important about it is that we come from war into peace. A time for war and a time for peace. A time for death and a time to be born and a time to die. These are cyclical processes. In God's world, it doesn't end. And good comes out of bad. Peace comes out of war. The word Jerusalem is they will see peace. And I always say, if you told me tomorrow, that there's peace in Switzerland, nobody's going to fall off their seat. But if you say there's peace in Jerusalem, Yerushalem, Shalom, they will see peace. Because in Jerusalem, that was, of course, is full of wars and challenges. One day, so peace comes from war, and this is really the story of not just a conversion of Ruth. That's why we read it on Shavuot in the Chag Matan Torah, in the holiday that we received the Torah, because everything is a conversion. Being with God is an ongoing act of conversion from our inclination to God's inclination, from our will to God's will, walking with God in the unknown desert into the final redemption.